What's up? Welcome in. Merry Christmas, everybody. Christmas in October here on the Sooners on SI podcast, episode 256. We are now even numbered during the week, odd numbered post games. Why? Because Oklahoma's off the bye week. They're headed to play Texas. I'm Ryan Chapman, managing editor down here in Moore. We've got the great John Hoover up in the 918. John, how did the off week treat you, my friend?
The off week was great, and what's better than restarting the season after an open date, right, with Oklahoma versus Texas? And we got a great guest coming up, Matt Galatzan, publisher at Texas Longhorns on SI.com. You might notice the logo there. He's the Texas version of me. The publisher down there in Austin knows all about the Longhorns. So, man, fired up to get him on and spruce up the show a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go under the hood with OU specifically, what they need to do against Texas. We'll then flip it when we link up with Matt. Great dude, by the way. I've done a bunch of recruiting camps and stuff with Matt and always enjoy talking to him. Then we'll round out the show and we'll get into kind of the rivalry element, some of the X factors, the stuff that we can't predict. But we're here, Hoove, like you said. Two things off the top. First off, can I just give a shout out to the Southeastern Conference? We get years like this every 4 or 5 years in college football where it's the double bye week. And shout out to the SEC for recognizing you could just spit everything into a scheduling matrix and let it pop out. Or if you've got 2 bye weeks, why not with Alabama and Georgia for their first bye week? What did the SEC do? They gave them both the off week to try and put on the best kind of show possible. That got over 11 million viewers. Oklahoma and Texas, what did they do? They both got a bye week. Same playing field. Give those two teams as much of a chance to get healthy. You can't control all the injuries, all that stuff. But shout out to the SEC, knowing that you've got 2 bye weeks, so being able to use those. We talked about it way in the off season that for Oklahoma, the schedule ended up setting up perfectly. You get a de facto bye week of Maine going into that Missouri game. You get an actual bye week going into Alabama and LSU to get the one before Texas. So Brent Venables said he didn't know if it was going to be a big benefit, big impact, whatever on the game. But I'm just glad to see that for once it's like all level playing field going into the biggest game of the year.
Yeah, it's well thought out by the SEC. And the fact is, Ryan, I saw a statistic yesterday. I think this is the first time since 1927 or 1929 that both Oklahoma and Texas were off the week before playing each other. Mind blown.
There's a lot of firsts that happen in this rivalry. They can play 120 times and still we find some new stuff. We have one order of business that Hoove, you're just going to have to give me 10 seconds. I don't know why this irked me as I got done with Ray today, but it did. Texas opened about a 14 and a half point favorite. It's up to 15 points somewhere. We all know this. This game is unhinged. It is often a 1-score game, but the people that are like, I do not understand how this is a 15-point spread. Listen to this whole thing. Don't just turn this on. How can it not be a 15-point spread? Because you know what sportsbooks do? They have very complex models that are spitting out projected scores. That's how you get the totals, the point spread, all that stuff. And up to this point, Texas has played nobody. We'll talk about it. But they've dominated nobody. Oklahoma struggled against Houston. That Tulane game got tight. The quarterback change happened, so not all the offensive numbers are on Michael Hawkins Jr. Most of them are not, but the offense has been putrid. It's been bad. When you just play this thing on paper, 15 points is probably right for Texas and what they've done so far. Here's the thing that we all know, though, and this is why I don't think anyone should get mad at it. This game's not played on paper. No one knows what's going to happen. I don't think this is going to be a 15-point game. I don't know if you think it's going to be a 15-point game. It never plays out that way. If everyone agrees that this is one of those games where you throw the records out, throw the point spreads out, why are people confused with the point spread? Let Vegas crunch the numbers and we'll enjoy the best rivalry in college football. Is that okay with everybody? Can we all do that?
I'm 100% with you. I think the point spread is about right. I would have said when last week, I think we talked about it. It's going to be double digits when it opens. It opened at 14 and a half, although some sports books weren't really sure where Oklahoma was going health-wise maybe. And they thought OU was going to get some players back, so they said it would be 8.5. But that changed obviously very quickly to settle in at about 2 touchdowns. If you look back at history, Ryan, Oklahoma has been an underdog in this game 2 times by double digits in the past 20. What would that be? 30 years. Okay, 1996, John Blake. They were anywhere from 20 and a half to 22 and a half point underdogs. Oklahoma was. John Blake's first year, we all know what happened, right? They got blown. No, wait. They came in 0-4, double-digit, three touchdown underdogs, and Oklahoma ended up winning that game in overtime. And then the other time Oklahoma was a double-digit underdog, didn't work out too well. Texas had its biggest win of the series before 2022, which was 45-12. So you get one that's a complete upset and then one where they cover. And that's just in the last 30 years. So Oklahoma's been a double-digit favorite in this, I should say. I don't know, 10 times, 8 times over the past 25 years, and they almost never cover. They covered in 2011, but for the most part, every other game where Oklahoma was favored to blow Texas out, they either had to win at the end, hang on at the end, or lose. Oklahoma would lose, has lost a couple of these where they're double digits. So I think you're right on with the money line. I think the big thing about this is whatever happens Saturday, short of 49-0, that's the one thing we don't expect on either side, right? We expect a tight game. It could be a Texas blowout. It could evolve into a Texas blowout, but I think Oklahoma's defense is going to be good enough to keep it close throughout the game.
Yeah, the big outlier in this series the last 5 to 10 years has been one where Oklahoma didn't have a functioning offense, basically, and everyone, I think, admits that. So that's one of those things where the energy, I think, has been right this week, or at least the energy we get from the fan base, which is excitement. Oklahoma getting to play the underdog role. I think Oklahoma fans like being able to have that chip on their shoulder. We know Brent Venables likes that. Just don't worry about the point spread. This game, we know you don't worry about it. So why is everyone just like, I don't understand how this happened? Who cares? It's a spreadsheet. It's a math problem. They're usually right. Not on this game. This game's not one of them. That's why you should stay away, always. But let's dive into it, Hoover. Like we said, Matt Galatzan, our fellow publisher over at Texas Longhorns on SI. We're going to do a huge deep dive into Texas, all that stuff. But let's look at Oklahoma, what they need to do specifically coming off this bye week. Last week, we talked about some of the more esoteric 10,000-foot view stuff, bye week, all that. This is pretty plain and simple, right? Texas's offense is really, really explosive. Oklahoma needs to find a way offensively, Hoove, to stay on the field a lot better than they did against Tennessee, certainly for the first 2.5 quarters, and then those middle 2 quarters against Auburn. Part of that is going to be the unknown of how much healthier did the offensive line get. We know the 5 guys that are going to start, but are they close to 100%? We know that Jake Taylor, last Wednesday, Brent Venables kind of talked about some of the losses and strength that he's had just because he's injured and can't work out and be able to build that back up. Branson Hickman, all that stuff. But getting Taylor Tatum back, we assume is going to happen. All that. Has this been enough time, for this Oklahoma offense maybe to get tailored a little bit more around Michael Hawkins to find a way that, hey, they don't have to score 40 points, but they need to be able to pick up 2 first downs, a drive probably at least, to give that defense time to not just breathe, but adjust, because Steve Sarkisian throws so much at a defense structurally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're Michael Hawkins, the progression of this thing could not have been scripted any better. Think about it. You get to come into an unwinnable game, basically the fourth quarter or the second half against Tennessee, basically. I know he came in the second quarter, but he basically played the second half, got engineered 2 fourth quarter touchdowns. Again, an unwinnable game. It was not, came in and it was 22-3, I think, at the time. And he brings them in, throws caution to the wind, runs around, throws the ball, scores, has some success against what is up to that point the best defense that Oklahoma's faced all season. Then he goes on the road, has a big play at the beginning, right? He can kind of get out of Norman a little bit, kind of focus on the opponent. Has a big play at the beginning at Auburn, runs for a touchdown, shows his skills, and then struggles a little bit. The offense struggled a little bit, to be sure. The offensive line certainly did. And then he comes out and wins the game at the end. He throws the big ball. He runs for the 2-point conversion. And Oklahoma wins that game on the road at the end. Now his third game as a Sooners, third meaningful action as a Sooner, is the Oklahoma-Texas game. Right after a bye week. He's had an entire week to study what he did previously, to study what Texas looks like, and now he's going into this game as probably well prepared as he will be for any game all year. Think about that. He's coming off that bye week. He's been to OU Texas before. He's been in the stadium for OU Texas games. He understands the vibe. He understands they had that whole scene on the road last year where his dad's crying on his shoulder and his mom's crying on his shoulder. He got kind of the emotions flushed. Now he can go back in, go to work with a week under his belt to study what's going on. He's got it laid out for him perfectly. And if I'm telling you, if he wins this thing, if Oklahoma gets enough plays from its quarterback, the defense stands up, they don't botch the thing on special teams. The defense gets a turnover here or there. And if he wins, if he's the winning quarterback, Ryan, I'm telling you, it's not going to surprise me at all.
He's a guy that it's just been 6 quarters. So there is danger in making, oh my God, grand, big proclamations. But he has not looked phased by anything. That hasn't meant that he's gone out there and thrown for 400 yards, this, that, or the other. And that is part of the OU offensive issues that even when Jack Snarl was in there, we were talking about. It's not just Michael Hawkins Jr. It's not just Jack Snarl, the offensive line, the wide receivers, the injuries, all that stuff. But you look at, if you just want to talk like you're worried about box score stuff, 2 weeks ago, if you hadn't had an illegal motion where Bauer Sharp's moving forward, it's not like a big, oh my gosh, he has 3 more passing yards, but he has that passing touchdown to Javonte Barnes. Great play call by Seth Luttrell. That's 4 more points already before the big time fourth quarter that would have been on the board. There was a really big chunk play to Bauer Sharp that was wiped off the board by a Jake Roberts offensive pass interference. Who knows what that drive could have looked like as far as with the Gavin Sawchuk run that Jake Roberts got called for the holding, what that could have meant for Oklahoma's offense. If we're talking about, hey, look, they found something with Gavin Sawchuk in the fourth quarter, and then they were able to really start running the ball in the fourth quarter, the whole conversation over the bye week would have been they finally got their offensive line. They worked out some of the kinks on the road, and look what happened in the fourth quarter. They finally started to run the football. It's those really fine margins. Are they going to have to improve on all that? Yeah, absolutely. That's what a bye week's for, right? To work on yourself that bye week with one eye to Texas and then make that turn. So one of the big questions, though, I think is going to be, I think it was George Stoya that asked it, I think, to Brent Venables, is basically when you talk about self-scouting with a true freshman quarterback, how much do you change to tailor around him versus how much do you say this is the stuff you ran all through the spring, all throughout camp, and maybe it was with one eye toward Jack Snod running the offense, but you're a true freshman. We don't want to put all that on your plate on top of throwing you into one of the most hectic environments that exists in college football. It's a great question, one that we won't know until Saturday.
Right. Yeah, well, that's the thing. The story that I wrote about Hawkins this year is that he's going to make history on Saturday. I should say this week. He's going to make history on Saturday, but only history knows how he's going to do. History and history ain't telling until it's over, right? That's when we'll know. So, yeah, he's the first. We talked about this previously 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. He's the first quarterback, unless something happens between the recording of this program and kickoff. He's the first quarterback at Oklahoma to start against Texas as a true freshman. Saying something about him, it's saying something about the state of Oklahoma's quarterbacks. I think it's also saying something about the state of quarterbacks in general, the readiness of these guys to come in and play early. Guy was trained by Kevin Murray. Who's Kevin Murray? He's Kyler Murray's dad and a renowned quarterback trainer, personal trainer. So he was trained by Kevin Murray. He was coached by Chad Morris at Allen High School in Allen, Texas. Kid knows how to play quarterback. Kid is poised, precociously, preternaturally poised, I guess might be a good word. I don't know. Probably too many P words. But he's a guy who doesn't seem flustered. His teammates, we talked to his teammates this week, and they're all like, yeah, it's kind of weird. He doesn't get flustered at anything. You see Sundays and Saturdays, you see NFL quarterbacks and big-time college quarterbacks coming off and they're hitting their head or they're screaming at somebody or screaming at themselves. He's not like that. Hawkins just like processes the play, gets the next play, and off they go.
Yeah, something that OU linebacker Kobe McKenzie, I think he put it best when we talked to him on Monday night. All the days run together. Monday night. And he was just like, yeah, I noticed it immediately. And he's like, it's uncommon. It's a little weird. And so if you missed that, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, hit the football tab, scroll a little bit. All the player interviews from Monday night, the Brent Venables press conference from Tuesday, that's up there. You can also hit Hoover's YouTube page, John Hoover Media on YouTube. While you're there, go ahead, follow the page, hit the little bell, subscribe to Hoob. And then that way, anytime we put out any press conference stuff, whatever, you can hit that there as well as the podcast. But part of the story of Michael Hawkins Jr. against Texas, frankly, has little to do with Michael Hawkins Jr. against Texas. Part of that story is going to be exactly what we talked about heading to the Auburn game. Oklahoma, on paper, their top 5 wide receivers heading into the season were all out, varying degrees of injury there. You're not going to get Jalou Faroo back yet for Texas, stuff like that. Obviously, we know the Jaden Gibson stuff, but we're recording on Wednesday, and the reason I didn't say, hey, let's wait and let's hold steady to see what that availability report says Wednesday night is maybe I'll look dumb in hindsight, but my prediction is we will see that Deion Burks is questionable, and I think that he'll run all the way up to game time, whether he plays or not is a game time decision or not, unless there's just such a big setback that they know he's not going to be there. Taylor Tatum should play, barring a setback. That's kind of how Brent Venables talked about it on Tuesday. So that's going to be the big question, who, if Burks can go, how much can he actually give you? But if not, is there someone that can emerge? Can JJ Hester take this thing forward? We heard on Monday night on the coaches show that Jacoby Johnson has that package. He'll be used. Or is this going to be as simple as you need 50 yards from Hester and 40 yards from Bauer Sharp and 2 big catches from Jake Roberts? I don't know if Oklahoma wins this game, Hoove. If we're sitting here in the postgame talking about Jalil Farooq having a career day or CeeDee Lamb making the Texas defense look silly, it might just have to be a little bit of everybody, a full team effort by the Oklahoma offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Deion Burks is capable of playing, right, then he's got to have a lot of catches. He's got to have a big involvement in this offense. 8 catches would be a minimum number, 7 or 8 catches for him, because he's got to have. He's a guy that can do some damage against a really talented, really athletic, and so far, we'll talk about the schedule here in a minute, but so far, a really accomplished Texas defense. I like the matchup if he's healthy. I like the Deion Burks matchup, although I would look for something a little different than what we've seen. Brent Venables talked about it in Auburn, and that is it's been dog years since we've seen an explosive play. Literally the entire first 4 games that didn't have an explosive play. They had one finally in the fourth quarter against Auburn. I think Brent Venables is going to say, Seth Littrell, we've got our ace receiver healthy. Deion Burks is back. Let's run him deep. Let's see if we can get him isolated man on man in some certain situations, run him deep, and tell the quarterback to chuck it as far as he can. Simple as that. You might see some Brennan Thompson action too. May not be something you want to count on because, you know, they've certainly had ample opportunities to do that previously and they haven't done it. So yeah, Brennan Thompson, I don't know, Jacoby Johnson seems a little, I don't know. I was probably expecting too much, right? When they flipped him to receiver from DB to receiver for that first game. Okay, now go to Auburn and catch 5 passes. That was probably unrealistic on my part. He's had an extra week now to study and get caught up. So maybe he's got that special package that they roll him out and they do something. So we'll see. And I think this might be a big game, and it usually is, Ryan, when you have a talented pass catcher at tight end. Oklahoma has, historically speaking, found ways to exploit that, whether it's, you know, somebody like a Blake Bell, Jermaine Gresham. You guys give me some ideas of who I'm overlooking in the passing game down in the red zone. Did Stogner even catch one against Texas? Maybe not.
Stogner had a big catch in 2020. Mark Andrews, obviously.
Right.
Jake Roberts.
Mark Andrews. Yeah, no, won the game. Mark Andrews won the game. I mean,
yeah.
17.
Yeah, Jake Roberts, who on Thursday head to OklahomaSooners.si.com. I'll have a cool story on Jake Roberts. Just basically a kid who grew up in Norman, hoping and dreaming to play in this football game. And he talked about Mark Andrews a little bit. I know he's talked about it in the past, at least, as far as watching that. Yeah, the tight end's a big deal in this game. When you look at like the Jacoby Johnson of it all, frankly, I thought if he got any run at Auburn, it would be in one of 2 ways. Both screen type situations, one where either he's the lead blocker because Brent Venables talked about his physicality, or where he's running behind like JJ Hester and he's catching the ball and just saying, hey, you're an explosive athlete, try and make that thing happen. We didn't even get to see that. We'll see if we see anything like that or any real usage of Jacoby Johnson. But another thing too is I know that we get so laser focused in on receivers must catch the ball. Javonte Barnes was used in some empty set stuff. And of the 3 running backs, Javonte Barnes, Taylor Tatum, Gavin Sawchuk, not that Javonte can't catch the ball, but I would say Taylor Tatum's a guy that if he's available, he's a very natural pass catcher. And he's someone that if we're coming out of this thing and we're regrouping in the post-game pod, talking about big Oklahoma victory, I think it's going to be a emergence of Taylor Tatum and Michael Hawkins, the two true freshmen running in Oklahoma's backfield and kind of raising the ceiling of what the rest of this back half of Oklahoma season could be.
If two freshmen lead them to victories and somebody young does something at receiver, think about that. This fan base is going to lose its mind.
It will. It'll be interesting though. You mentioned it, the Texas schedule so far, and we'll talk about this with Matt here in a little bit, but Colorado State, Michigan doesn't look anything like it. I knew that going into the season, we were like, this Michigan team lost a lot, but there's been lethargic even by, I think, what people thought. What, UTSA, ULM, and Mississippi State. That's 5, right? Can I count? Yep. There you go. No, not a real murderer's row there. And while that may lead to numbers being inflated or not, we'll find out. You tell me. I think one thing that visually pops off is Texas secondary to me, who looks just a lot more physical this year than they have been in years past under Kowski and all that stuff. I'm really fascinated to see if a Deion Burks isn't able to go, if JJ Hester isn't able to spin this thing and take the Auburn performance and use that as momentum. You're talking about some of the same issues. Brennan Thompson's an undersized guy. Zion Ragon's undersized guy. Taylor Tatum's not the biggest guy in the world. Zion Curry is big, but he's a true freshman. So is he ready for the physicality of a game like this? We'll find out. That would be my concern if Deion Burks isn't able to really truly give it a go, even if he's available, but is like a decoy. Is our Oklahoma's wide receivers just going to kind of get bullied a little bit because of how physical Texas secondary is? I don't think we can find that out until Saturday, but that would be my big concern, is that I do think the physicality on the back end of Texas is for real, and we haven't really seen Oklahoma's receivers respond well to that thus far.
That's why you got to throw it to the tight end.
Exactly.
I think those guys are going to get physically bullied, and I think the tight end's got to have the football. Look for a potential big game from Bauer Sharp. I know it's a little bit. He's my under the radar guy this week, I think. And that sounds weird because he's the second leading receiver on the team. But I see him having the potential for a big numbers game this week, over 100 yards, and which would be huge, Ryan, because Oklahoma has not had a 200-yard passer yet, has not had a 100-yard receiver, and has not had a 100-yard rusher. And after Saturday, we're at the halfway point of the season. So that tells you a lot about where this offense is.
Yeah, it gives, and I know that last year's offensive line was more cemented and more talented, but it gives similar vibes to the lead up of last year's game. I think it's why all of us at the site had such a difficult time picking Oklahoma to win last year. Not that it couldn't happen, but you're relying on things we hadn't seen thus far, a consistent running game, things like that. Oklahoma got it, and they got it in the form of Dylan Gabriel, of all people. It wasn't even Javonte Barnes or something like that. Michael Hawkins, certainly capable. Javonte Barnes, Gavin Sawchuk, Taylor Tatum, certainly capable of putting up numbers we haven't seen yet this year. So we'll find out. You flip that over, though, the other side of the ball. The known quantity for Oklahoma is this defense, a group that another week of rest. We saw they tried to do their best to basically win the game by themselves against Tennessee. They kept that thing really close. Didn't look as good for stretches of that game against Auburn. I think we can all take a step back and say they looked a little gassed and they had been on the field a lot, but you shouldn't have that excuse this week. And this is going to be a little bit different against this Texas offense, who I'm not as concerned about Oklahoma's defense being on the field for 9 minutes in the second quarter and 9 minutes in the third quarter and wearing down. For Texas, you look at them through 5 games, they've connected on 45 passing plays of 15 yards or more. And it's not just inflated. They hit Michigan for 8 of those. Michigan, the best defense they've seen this year. Texas is explosive and they're vertical. And we've seen it was really just 2 bad pass plays against Tennessee. One of them led to a touchdown. One of them, Oklahoma was able to bow up and get that stop. But Auburn had 7 of those before the very last play of the game. They finished with 8. The last one was a Hail Mary. I don't really count that because they didn't get close to the end zone. That's what Oklahoma wanted to do. But Auburn hit 7 of those. Going to have to be better from Kenai Walker. Going to have to be tightening stuff up on the back end of that OU defense to prevent Texas from hitting a bunch of deep shots inside the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, Ryan, I'll give you a couple of names and a couple of numbers here real quick. Nico Iamaleava for Tennessee is a good thrower of the football. He's a good quarterback. I like him. The receivers that they had, Brew McCoy is a good receiver. DeAndre Thornton is a good receiver. You spin that over to Auburn, and Peyton Thorne is a good thrower of the ball. If you look at his throws, he throws a nice ball. Not really sure who's going to catch it all the time, but he is. He's a good passer. He throws the football downfield very well. And Keandre Lambert-Smith, their receiver, big play receiver, talented play. We're talking another level with Oklahoma is facing Texas this week. We're talking an entirely different level. Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning are better than either of those guys at throwing the football. Even though Quinn Ewers also, especially in this game, has been known to cough the football up a little bit, not be careful with it. He is in the scope of this offense, he is fantastic. And Texas's receivers will be the best receivers that Oklahoma has faced so far this season. So what does that do? That should be an alarm, a red flag, flashing lights, stop signs, whatever you want to say, for this Oklahoma secondary. Those guys have got to play better, or this team is going to be they're going to get cooked. You have to exploit what you can do well, which is stop the run. Maybe you can hit a deep ball. Maybe your quarterback can get out and spread the football out a little bit and expose the defense. Maybe your kicker hits a field goal somewhere. Maybe your punter pins them down at the 5 and creates a field position switch or something like that. You can't turn the football over. You've got to take the turnovers from the other team when they get there. Another thing you can't do is give up 50-yard touchdowns. And that's what Oklahoma has done so far this year that you just can't do when you're playing Texas. If that happens against Texas, if they don't do all that other stuff right, but they give up the 50-yard touchdowns, it's going to be a blowout.
Yeah, and that's what comes with the momentum waves in this game. And just because you get in a hole in the first quarter doesn't mean you're not going to be in the game in the fourth quarter. How many times going into halftime does one team sit there and go, dang, we dominated the first 20 minutes of this football game, and you look up and it's only a 3-point game with the team that's down getting the ball back, have a chance to change everything. That happens every year, it feels like, in this game. But just because Michael Hawkins Jr. has been unflappable, don't give him a reason to show that he's flappable, right? Like, help your young guy out. As much as Oklahoma's offense needs to help the defense out, sustain some drives, this is where Oklahoma's defense, don't put them in a spot where Texas hits a quick strike, especially the times when Oklahoma is starting the next drive in the Texas end. It's what Sark talked about at SEC Media Days, that you have to go silent count on one half of the stadium, and then you've got all the momentum in the other half. It's such a bizarre, everyone listening knows this, right? Don't put Michael Hawkins 1st and 10 on his own 25 in the Texas end with Bevo bearing down on his back, and make him dig you out of holes and make him shut up the Texas end of the field, right? Like, help him out. And the flip side of that too is Oklahoma, they've been so good turning the ball over. They've been really good pulling fumbles. They've forced or recovered 8 fumbles. Jaden Blue, Texas running back, has struggled with fumbles. That was kind of a storyline going into the bye week. Like, help that out. Quinn Ewers had a key fumble last year. That doesn't happen if they're able to sit back in and they're on the field for 3 plays, hitting 50-yard chunk plays. You got to give Texas a chance to, like, Oklahoma's going to lay the traps, but if they just go totally over it and circumnavigate everything, then you're not going to be picking Quinn Ewers off if Isaiah Bond's 2 steps behind Kenai Walker because Kenai Walker gave up the inside again.
Similarly, Ryan, I don't think you can give up more than maybe 2 touchdown drives or scoring drives of 10, 12 plays or more. If you give up 3 or 4 of those things or 5 of those things, that's going to be a long day for that Oklahoma defense. You talked about getting a little gassed at Auburn. I think they kind of I think they held up against Tennessee, but they did get gassed against Auburn. They're coming off the bye week. Maybe they'll be okay, but what you need to have happen is for Austin English, Ethan Downs, right, to play out of his mind like he did last year. And I say the Austin English thing because Austin English was one of those guys that would go up against Texas. He's from Canadian Texas. He would go up against Texas, and here he goes. He'd go get whichever McCoy brother they were rolling out that year, or whatever it was. He was a guy that would play. He was a good player, and he was all Big 12 a couple times, and everybody was appreciative of his contributions. But when he played against Texas, he took things to another level. It's exactly what Ethan Downs has done. the last couple of years for sure. So you need somebody like that, like a Kobe McKenzie, making maybe a Danny Stutzman. Hard for an All-American to play out of his mind, but somebody who you don't expect to come up with a couple of sacks. Maybe it's our Mason Thomas this time, and maybe it's not necessarily on the last drive of the game where he sacks the guy 2 or 3 times and bats down a pass. Maybe he does that in the first quarter and generates a turnover that somebody scoops and scores. Those are the kind of lightning bolt plays that you're going to need if you're Oklahoma, as we talked about, as a 2-touchdown underdog.
Yeah, you look at it, the strength of this Texas team is the offensive line. They lean on that group. 4 of those 5 guys came back from a year ago. Jake Majors is quickly climbing the Texas charts, like all-time start. So you've got experience there. This Oklahoma defensive line, I think the Texas offensive line was shell-shocked the first quarter a year ago with how physical they played. As much as Texas's offensive line is better this year than what they were last time these two teams met, Oklahoma's defensive front is better this year. And so that's going to be the chess match, right? Is you have a different confidence, a different swagger about Kip Lewis, who became an unlikely hero a year ago because of what he could do on the goal line. Now he's going to be tormenting Texas's offense for the entire game. Danny Stutzman's taking his game to another level. Dejon Terry's playing the best football of his career. But it all is going to boil down to one thing, Hoove. And I know in this game we talk about, can you get off the field on third down? When Oklahoma or Texas hits a big chunk play, the teams that win more often than not are the ones that chunk play only turns into a field goal instead of a touchdown. But for Oklahoma, it's got to be defensively. They have to win first down, because part of what killed Oklahoma in the second quarter, especially, and kind of a little bit in that third quarter against Auburn, is that Auburn was in 2nd and 4. It felt like the entire game, which let Hugh Freeze use his entire playbook and do whatever he wants. Steve Sarkisian is as gifted as it comes in offensive mind when it comes to the pre-snap motion, window dressing, all this stuff, putting your safeties in conflict before the snap, because now Billy Bowman and Robert Spears-Jennings see a shift. They think they've seen that on film. They're thinking, I'm going to trigger and try and stop the run. Then suddenly Kenai Walker's left on an island and Quinn Ewers is pulling the ball, throwing it downfield. You know what? If it's 2nd and 11, a lot of that stuff wipes away, and especially third down. Those are the moments that Brent Wills talked about, when the difference between Army and Thomas hitting in the fourth quarter against Tulane and Auburn versus just being a nuisance the rest of the season has been, they're in obvious passing situations where Zach Galley and Brent Wills can just say, R. Mason, kill that guy. And that only happens when you get into 3rd and long, 2nd and long. That starts on first down.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. If they're in 2nd and long, if Oklahoma can, you don't have to dominate first down. You don't have to have them 2nd and 10 every time, but just don't give up big plays don't give up big plays, but don't give up a lot of first down yardage. Don't give up a lot of first down plays. And what that will do is that will allow your defense to not necessarily pin its ears back, but play in a more relaxed mode, less of a guessing game as to what they're looking at, what they think they're seeing. So, your safeties are huge in this game, because we've seen a couple of those deep balls against Kenai Walker, and who was the other one against? I think if it wasn't Devin Bowen, it was Woody Washington. It was one of those two.
Eli Bowen got beat on one at Auburn. There were a couple of moments of Woody, which Woody against Houston, trying to rotate over. He was a little late. Brent Venables last Wednesday said that Woody had been a little bit banged up. We knew that he'd obviously missed the opener. So another week of help. Does that mean that Woody's more in step with, he'll be probably on a gunner helm, the tight end, stuff like that? We'll have to see, but that's going to be huge, obviously, to have some help over the top.
Yeah, to have those safeties back and relying on or being able to rely on them is going to be huge for this game, because Texas has 2 receivers that average over 18 yards a catch. I think it's 2, it might be 3. And one of them was a guy who wanted to go to OU, Jonte Cook. He's a guy now that plays for Texas. He told me that TCU was his dream school when he was like a junior in high school, and then I came along and said, I cover OU. Is OU a dream school? Yeah, I think OU would be a dream school too. Where'd he end up? He ended up at Texas. So he's a guy that OU wanted. Lincoln Riley, I think, wanted at some point. But things worked out. Now he's catching long balls for Texas. So that's just another guy, another one of those guys that Oklahoma's defense is going to have to put a radio tracker on and not lose track of.
Good news for Oklahoma. It's a veteran defense, and they'll get another piece back too. Sounds like Deshaun McCullough, based off of what Danny Stutzman refused to tell us on radio on Monday. Based off what Brent Venables has said the last 2 weeks, McCullough going to make his season debut in the Cotton Bowl. Don't think that suddenly means that Deshaun McCullough is going to play 50 snaps or anything like that, but a guy that him and Kip Lewis were the penetrators on the second and third down plays on that goal line stand a year ago that has gone a long way toward forming what this Oklahoma defense is. If you want to read more about that, go to OklahomaSoonersOnSI.com. This little John Hoover, I believe, had a really nice column about that coming out of Tuesday's press conference. But you'll see McCullough back, and it feels like short yardage situations, and Oklahoma's going to be able to give Steve Sarkisian a lot of looks to think about when it comes to Sim Omasigo at the Cheetah. We've seen Trace Ford be used at the Cheetah a little bit. And Deshaun McCullough, though he'd been working inside backer for a lot of spring football and the piece of fall camp that he almost got up into, that's someone that's going to be comfortable out there. And another really big physical body that Oklahoma is going to just roll out there when they're in those big spots up against the goal line, up against a 3rd and 2, stuff like that.
Yeah, more and more every week it seems like somebody else is getting back to getting healthy. Maybe next week that'll be Farouk. Who knows for the offense? But yeah, he's a big piece. McCullough, if you look at his season in totality last year, he's one of the highest graded defenders according to Pro Football Focus. He didn't necessarily have a ton of snaps, but that's because Kendall Dolby came out and emerged at that position. In the teams that they played down the stretch, you needed a Kendall Dolby more than you needed a Deshaun McCullough at that position. So it's the hybrid situation. I wouldn't look for Deshaun if he does get out there, if he's healthy. I wouldn't look for him to be playing very much deep safety like we've seen out of Woody Washington a couple of times or Peyton Bowen a couple of times. I would look for him to be at the line of scrimmage and probably with a green light. If you think about it, green light, go get him, shoot that A gap, get around the edge. Don't worry about anything else. This is the package that we've put in specifically for you at practice in your first couple of weeks back. Go get him. That's what Brent Venables needs to tell him at some point.
And if nothing else, if you get into a situation where they're having to repel a couple of 8, 10, 12 play drives, another body goes a long way. Another experienced body as far as being able to rotate those guys in and hopefully you're in a spot where you're not getting dragged in the 3rd and the 4th quarter as far as, someone getting 2 extra yards, stuff like that. So we shall see. Let's take a quick timeout. Let's bring in our good friend Matt Galatzan, do a big deep dive on the Texas Longhorns. He's the publisher at Texas Longhorns on SI, our sister site over there covering the Horns. We'll welcome him in. Then we'll be back and look at some of the fun rivalry hijinks. So stick with us. We're going to head over to Matt Galatzan right now. Welcome back in. We have a very special guest. If you listen to our Auburn preview, you know what's going down here. Little behind enemy lines, opponent preview, whatever you want to call it. Matt Galatzan, Longhorns on SI, our sister site over there covering the Horns. Matt, how's it going? Things have gone well, I guess, from a coverage standpoint through 5 weeks and a bye week for Texas.
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt when your team's ranked #1 in the country. It's a blessing from the media gods and the traffic gods right there. But no, things are going pretty well. It's been a pretty smooth season. No kind of crazy controversies like we've been used to in years past. So it's been pretty smooth sailing so far.
Seems like the biggest thing so far for Texas was a little bit of the running back injury stuff in fall camp, and then Quinn Ewers goes down, but Arch stepped in and played well, and Quinn Ewers looks set to return and start this Red River rivalry, yeah?
Yeah, I mean that's probably the biggest question mark for the Texas offense is the running back situation. It's been a little up and down. They've been running the ball well, but it hasn't been a consistent. Okay, this guy's the guy. We can count on him in the crunch. That was supposed to be Jaden Blue, but he had some fumble issues. He had some injury issues. Quintravion Wisner's kind of stepped up and. He's made a case for running back 1 this week, potentially versus Oklahoma, but we'll see. And, Jarrett Gibson's been a good, kind of complimentary freshman guy that can kind of run in between the tackles. He still is kind of trying to pick up a lot of stuff. So it's a little bit thinner of a room than they'd like. In terms of the quarterback situation, Steve Sarkisian's such a good developer of the position and he's also kind of blessed with the talent of Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, so that kind of helps. But you don't really see a drop off when Quinn comes out and Arch goes in terms of the way they run the offense. there's some different smaller things that change. But they're going to be happy to have Quinn back this week because he's the real general of the offense and he knows the little things that Arch is still trying to pick up. And I think you'll be able to tell that difference, when you watch them in games back to back.
Matt Galatzan is our guest. Texas Longhorns on SI.com. Check out his work and his crew's work there. They do a great job. Let's talk about the receivers. Isaiah Bond, obviously the big name that came over in the offseason. He's already lived up to the hype. 3 touchdowns in 5 games, 18 yards a catch. But they've got a core of guys, literally a posse of guys that they throw the football to, and they like all of them. I say, and Ryan made reference to this to me earlier in the week, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday, we talked about the big plays that Texas is going to generate in the pass game. That's what they do, and that's what Oklahoma struggles at.
Yeah, I think that this is a much different looking Texas offense in terms of personnel than you saw last year. They had Xavier Worthy who could pop the big play, and they had Adonai Mitchell who could sometimes pop the big play, and Jordan Whittington was kind of the in between in the middle kind of a guy that would grind out the tough catches and things like that. This year, they've got multiple guys that can do all of it. So it's a very interesting change. The fact that they're deeper at the position, I think, makes them more explosive because, last year, those 3 guys had to run pretty much the entire game. And towards the end of games, they would kind of get worn out. This year, that's not so much the case. So, I think they're hoping they can kind of take advantage of that against Oklahoma. But Oklahoma did a pretty good job of slowing down Tennessee too. So they haven't really seen a defense like Oklahoma that can do the kind of things that they can do. So it could balance itself out a little bit, but Sark likes to take his shots. So I'm sure we'll see that early and often.
Big part of that obviously has got to be being able to protect Quinn Ewers. Arch Manning. Texas brought 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen back from last year. It felt like this group, I know Oklahoma fans have a little bit of warped perception of what Texas offensive line was because you know better than us. Felt like that group really turned a corner after the OU game last year and really started to soar. Feels like they're in a really, really good spot to take on Oklahoma's defensive front with those guys up front.
I don't think you're wrong about that at all. I think, Texas lost their right tackle to the NFL and Christian Jones, and they replaced him with Cameron Williams, who didn't really have much game experience. Early in the year, he kind of struggled against Michigan with false start penalties. And then the next couple of weeks, he kind of kept struggling with those penalties. But from an overall protection standpoint, and honestly, from a run game standpoint as well, I think that this unit has really improved. Especially Kelvin Banks. He's going to be probably be the number 1 pick from an offensive tackle standpoint next year. So he's been fantastic, even better than he was last year. DJ Campbell's taken a step forward. Jake Majors and Hayden Connor are both super experienced and really understand the offense, and they really understand what Sark's trying to do. So, it's honestly, they've got a tremendous wide receiver core, one of the most talented in the country. They've got a great pair of quarterbacks back there, no matter who's in the game. But that offensive line is really the strength of their team this season. And I think it's going to be sort of what sets them over the top from what they've been under Sark in years past.
Matt, what do you think about how Texas's defense has done so far this year? They've put up numbers, obviously. They've beaten some, say what you want about Michigan. They've beaten a good team on the road. Had a fantastic defensive game plan, I thought, for that game. I was one of the, 10 million people who watched that game. One of the premier non-conference games of the year so far. But then they've played some rum-dums. They've played some teams that just aren't any good. So without maybe heavy commentary on the schedule, let's just start with the defense and how the defense have kind of responded to the moment.
Well, I think that they made some changes this offseason that have really made a difference from what they were last year. Last year, they had one of the worst pass defenses in the country. They got torched by Washington in the college football playoff, and that ended their season. And they really made that an emphasis this offseason. They brought in Andrew Makuba at safety. They brought in some depth at corner. They moved Jahdae Barron to, I believe he's playing field corner now, which, he can play any position in the secondary, but having his experience over there has been a major upgrade. And they've had some young guys step up too, and Michael Taft has taken a step forward there. So that's helped tremendously. I personally think that the numbers are a little bit inflated due to the schedule because, Louisiana Monroe, UTSA, not exactly game breakers. Colorado State, as much as their quarterback and wide receiver like to talk, that's not a very good offense either. But I thought they showed some holes against Mississippi State, which was a little bit concerning to me. Overall, they gave up 13 points. They gave Mississippi State a short field a handful of times, which resulted in points, and they still kept them out of the end zone, which is good. And they've been okay at forcing turnovers, but there were some things in that game. They gave up some big runs. They had some problems containing that freshman quarterback for Mississippi State. I can't recall his name right now, but the guy's got legs, and he was able to make some runs against Texas. And as we know, Michael Hawkins can do that pretty well. So um, I think this is going to be Michigan's quarterback was not ready for that game. I think this is going to be their biggest test of the year offensively, even though Oklahoma's offense isn't putting up the crazy numbers we're used to seeing in the past. They don't have a Dylan Gabriel, but they still have talent there. Taylor Tatum can take the top off the defense from a running back perspective. So this will be their biggest test, and if they perform well today, I'll feel better about where they are going for. Or sorry, on Saturday, I'll feel better about where they are going forward. But until I see what they do against Oklahoma, it's still kind of up in the air to me.
Ryan, let me jump in and ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
What do you think the Jeff Levy factor is going back to last week's game? How much is he going to share with Oklahoma's defensive coaches?
I don't know how much Jeff Levy's going to factor in there, just because I think Jeff Levy, we actually saw something from him last week that you have, or 2 weeks ago, you haven't seen ever, which is an awareness of you can't run the gone in 60 seconds offense against Texas with the backup. You actually have to run some clock and things, which is something he never did at Oklahoma and it never really do it at any of his other stops too. It seemed like I don't know if it threw Texas off. They got more time to breathe, but it seemed that initially, Matt, it was kind of what the heck is going on here? We've not seen this before.
Yeah, I think that they definitely were more prepared for the other quarterback from Mississippi State, who they had seen before. Blake Shapen was at Baylor, and they had gone up against him before, so they were kind of prepared for him to run the offense and do it pretty quickly. But when that freshman came in, it kind of threw everything off a little bit, and they were just like, all right, you can only prepare so much with your scout team against a mobile quarterback, and I think that did play a factor in some of that stuff, but Oklahoma's got some better players than Mississippi State, so I think they'll be all right there.
Yeah, Oklahoma certainly. You mentioned it. We all saw it against Auburn, that first drive of what Hawkins can do on the ground. Kind of the trouble Oklahoma's had, though, is the offensive line incredibly banged up, can't really move anybody. Part of that's because they've been playing with a bunch of backups, things like that. How does this Texas defensive line come along as far as big question? I know we talked about this on radio, Matt, as far as replacing Murphy, replacing Sweat, that kind of stuff. How have they come along there up the middle? Because that's been something that the Sooners really couldn't handle at all against Tennessee and for 2 quarters that Auburn game.
Well, I think they've got some guys there that are really talented. They don't have the game-changing guys like Sweat and Murphy, obviously, but Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins are experienced. They're very good players. Tia Savea and Bill Norton are big humans that can just move people. So they've got the talent there that can probably cause Oklahoma some problems. But I think honestly, the biggest improvement for Texas along the defensive line as a whole has been the pass rush. They brought in Trey Moore, who hasn't put up the numbers, but he's been affecting the quarterback. Colin Simmons, freshman, has just been unbelievable, out of the gate in his first 5 games. So I think that as a whole, that defensive front has improved all around in terms of, because that was their big issue last year, was the pass rush, and they were solid up the middle. Now it's a little bit more balanced. So that could cause Oklahoma some issues. I think that without Sweat and Murphy in there, it's just kind of a different dynamic. So we'll have to see how it plays out on Saturday.
Matt, let's talk about that schedule a little bit more. Colorado State, they bashed them. Colorado State's not any good. I think they're 2-4 with an FCS win. Michigan, say sure 111,000 at Michigan, that's a test. Defending national champion, that's a test. But they've rebuilt their coaching staff, they've rebuilt their offense, they've rebuilt their defense, lost their quarterback. So Michigan might be going from national title to chasing a winning record this year. UTSA I think is 2-4 as well. They've beaten an FCS and a really bad FBS. ULM's 4-1, but I think an FCS victory and another bad. They beat UAB, I think, who's just not any good. And then Mississippi State, arguably I say the worst team in the SEC. We'll see how that plays out, but they can make a case for it at this stage. They ain't played nobody, Paul. I mean, that's what when I see the Texas schedule, and yet the flip side is Oklahoma, other than Tennessee, hasn't really played much of anybody at all. So who has the advantage here?
So that's the big narrative about Texas, right? Is everybody saying, "Oh, they're by far the best team in the country. They're better here, better there. They, whatever." I'm kind of more on your side in that where like they got to play somebody first. Beating UTSA 56-7 doesn't tell me anything. And I don't think there's an argument about it. Mississippi State is the worst team in the SEC at this point to me. Maybe Missouri's making a case for that at this point.
Yeah.
Right now, to me, it's definitely Mississippi State. So, look, when it comes down to it, I think Oklahoma is the more battle-tested team. They faced a lot of adversity. At the beginning of the season, they had some issues at quarterback. They have made a change there. They've Tennessee's a good team. Yeah, they lost to Arkansas last week, but everybody knows Arkansas is tough out no matter how good they are. They're always going to play tough, especially in Fayetteville. So, that's really the big question here is what has Texas really done? And I don't know. It's a cause for concern for me. I mean, I'm very confident that they're a good football team. I think that they're a better football team than they were last year, even though they lost a lot to the NFL, just because I think they're deeper overall and that kind of thing. But it's honestly it's a big question mark, and we'll find out on Saturday whether or not that's going to be kind of exposed or not. But I do think Texas, from an overall standpoint, has the more talented team. Obviously, Oklahoma has been without a lot of wide receivers this year, and Texas has very deep wide receivers who can take the top off the defense and do a lot of stuff there, and their tight ends are good. So, I do give Texas the advantage, but they're going to have to prove it to me.
Steve Sarkisian entering his fourth battle at the Cotton Bowl. He's a year ahead, right? Brent Venables and all that stuff as far as building the staff, recruiting, all that stuff. He's been there a year longer. But in many ways, Venables has a much larger wealth of knowledge in this game specifically, just of all the time he was defensive coordinator at Oklahoma. Sark's had as good an OU Texas experience as you can have in 2022. He's had two that kind of got away from him and it just were hectic in different ways in 21 and 23. Have you kind of seen how he's approached this game evolve over the last 3 years as he enters his fourth one?
Well, I think it's impossible to understand this rivalry until you've played it a couple times. I mean, 9 of the last 10 games have been decided by one score, I think. And the dynamic of that stadium is so different than anything you'll face for the rest of the season. So, I do think he's learned a lot. I think he's learned a lot in terms of, the unpredictability of the game, how he's going to face the adversity in those situations. But Venables definitely has the advantage there. I mean, they're 1-1 against each other. The first one was kind of a wash because it was Venables' first year, and I don't really put too much stock into that game. But I think last season when Oklahoma pulled off the upset was definitely the more Texas Oklahoma of the two. You know what I mean? But he's since coming into this rivalry, he's been put into a lot of situations where he's up against the wall. College football playoff last year was a big learning experience for him as a head coach. And that 5-7 season was a big learning experience for him as a head coach. And I think that he's finally at a point where he understands what he needs to do. The problem is, as good of an offensive mind as he is, and as good of an offensive coordinator he is, and all that stuff, Brent Venables is the defensive version of that, in my opinion. I think that there's not a better defensive mind in college football than Brent Venables, who knows how to sort of counter what Steve Sarkisian is trying to do and can learn on the fly and make adjustments just as quick. So, I think that's probably the biggest factor right there is there's not another coach in the country that can kind of cause him the problems that Brent Venables can cause, regardless of the talent level in the game. And it'll be interesting to see what he does on Saturday.
Matt, let's expand that conversation a little bit further. I want to talk about Sark the Builder. You mentioned the 5-7 season. I think 8-5 the second year, then 12-2 college football playoff. This year, number 1 ranking. Holy cow! He's on an upward track. You go back and look at his predecessors. The country club thing with Mac Brown at the end, obviously placed Texas where it was for a decade or so. Charlie Strong was probably in over his head. Captain Mensa was in over his head as well. Tom Herman was, just in terms of the size and scope. I think he's a good football coach, but in terms of the size and scope of what Texas is, I think it was too big for him. So here we are with Sark in year 4. How impressed have you been by what he's built and maybe is on track to sustaining that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've been super impressed because for a long time there, I thought that this whole Texas thing was just kind of lost. I thought that after the end of the Mac Brown era and Charlie Strong and Tom Herman, that it was just too far gone. It was going to be too big for anybody else to step in, unless they had, there was the rumors about Nick Saban for a while that were kind of ridiculous, but it was going to take that kind of guy to fix it. Well, what they decided to do was bring in Nick Saban's protege, basically. And he took a lot of those lessons from him in terms of how to build a program, the kind of guys to bring into the program, the kind of culture that you have to build to be able to sustain success. And I think he's done a really great job at that. Everybody's bought in, that they have a defined leader in Quinn Ewers, which, technically they had that with Sam Ehlinger in the past with Tom Herman, but the rest of the roster wasn't there to support that. And I think they have that roster now. They got, Sark said earlier this year that they've got, 22 leaders on the team, that everybody on that roster is bought in and leading the team and doing the things that they need to do to sustain. And part of that's recruiting also. He's done a tremendous job on the recruiting trail. He's done the kind of things that Georgia and Alabama have done in the past, where they go get the guys they want. They lose a few battles here and there. Michael Fasusi's a big one, obviously, that Oklahoma won that battle. But I think he's doing all the little things right that those guys in the past and at the end of the Mac Brown era, they just kind of took for granted in a way. But also the new leadership at the top as well with Chris Del Conte has made a big difference, because there was a lot of, we'll call it distraction, before he took over and before Sark took over, and that's all gone, so that plays a big role in it as well. But I really do think that this is a long-term thing that we're going to see, a sort of, I'm not going to put him with, he hasn't won anything yet, obviously, so I'm not going to put him with Kirby Smart or Nick Saban or Pete Carroll, but I think he's on that trajectory if he can keep it up, and I'm pretty confident that he will be able to do that.
I got to say real quick how impressed I am by what he's done. I watch all his press conferences and listen to what he says. I'm just impressed by how he carries himself, how he presents himself and represents the program. I'll admit, when he was hired, I thought, oh, that's a good hire, a 53% career, winning percentage guy, a guy who flamed out at 2 other places, a guy who has substance abuse or addiction problems. That's a great hire, Texas. You really pat yourself on the back for that one. And I'm eating crow because he's been fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things that he does, in fact, I think it's the one of the biggest things, in my opinion, is the way that he takes accountability and sticks up for his players. You know, you see other programs around the country. I'm thinking of one in particular, Auburn, with Hugh Freeze. It's always the player's fault with Hugh Freeze. You know, it's always something else. It's always, you know, referees or players or my guys didn't execute. We had a great game plan. 9 out of 10 times we win this game, whatever. If the best example of this I can think of is 2022, Quinn Ewers against Oklahoma State, worst game of his career, absolute worst game of his career. And Sark took 100% accountability. I didn't put him in position to win. I didn't call the right plays. I didn't do enough to help him prepare for this game. And the players hear that and they appreciate it. And that's what helps them buy in. And I think a lot of that came from his time with Nick Saban. And I really do. And obviously his time with Pete Carroll helped. But the Nick Saban thing, he said that Nick Saban saved his life. And he means that in multiple ways. And I think that that's why he carries himself that way, is because he idolizes that guy and he tries to put all of that into what he's doing on a daily basis.
Certainly a lot to be figured out on the Oklahoma side of things. I think a lot of leeway with injuries, stuff like that. But I don't think anyone would be too upset if we get many Sarkisian v. Venables battles over the next 5-10 years. Because also, if you're talking about Matt, I mean, the way it's that they mirror each other in so many ways, just one's an offensive guy, one's a defensive guy, different sides of the Red River. It makes a ton of fun. And we'll all get together. We'll see you up there. The 120th battle between Oklahoma and Texas. I can't wait to be bolted into a chair at the Cotton Bowl, seated alongside you guys as we try to figure whatever this fiesta is going to be.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, guys. I think that this coaching matchup is going to be one that we see for a very, very long time, sort of in a Mac Brown, Bob Stoops kind of vein. So it's going to be a good one this year.
Texas Longhorns on SI.com. Check him out, Matt Galatzan. Good stuff.
Be sure. Appreciate it, Matt. We'll see you. Huge thank you again to Matt. We really appreciate him taking some time out, breaking this thing down. John, we've sliced it, we've diced it, we've looked at Oklahoma's offense, Oklahoma's defense, Texas offense, Texas defense. Now here's the big secret. It's coming 30, 45 minutes into the pod, all that stuff. None of this matters. We'll break it all down all week long. We have tons of great content, all the stories. Weird ass happens inside the Cotton Bowl every single year, and that is where we're going to digest all of this now. I just labeled this whole section the X Factor stuff because with this game more than any other, it truly is that, right? You have unlikely heroes, wild, and all that. The two things that hold true in this game that everyone knows going in is typically turnovers. You win the turnover margin, you're going to have a good shot, but especially just straight up, whoever rushes 4 more yards typically wins. OU Texas last year, it was kind of a shocker on the OU front. They got a hair over 200, 114 of that being with Dillon Gabriel. We kind of touched on that earlier. A big part of that could be Michael Hawkins Jr., but Hoove, you are the keeper of the stat when it comes to this specific angle in a rivalry game. This will be Quinn Ewers' 3rd OU Texas game. Quinn Ewers had the benefit of taking on the Dillon Gabriel-less Oklahoma Sooners in his first OU Texas game. So his first start was not tough compared to what it typically is. Michael Hawkins Jr. is faced with being a first-time starter in this game. That typically doesn't bode well for the first-time starters, does it, Hoove?
So yeah, the numbers go like this, and I unearthed this back when Sam Bradford was playing, and I've kind of kept up with the numbers since, right? Just add to it every year, adjust it however many, whoever comes into the lineup. So the numbers have evolved. So from 1990, right, starting in 1990, because that's kind of when if you take out the triple option and you take out the wishbone and the veer option that Texas ran, all that stuff. Modern football, right? You need a quarterback that's going to read defenses. You need a quarterback that's going to watch what the safety does and where the weak side linebacker is coming from and who's the mic. And you need a quarterback that's processing things at the line of scrimmage in the throw game. So that's kind of where I started. This was 1990. This statistic is kind of crazy, or it used to be kind of crazy. It's getting kind of weird now. Check this out. When you have a quarterback in this game who has never played in this game before, and he goes up against a quarterback who has played in this game before, this guy who has not played in the game before used to have almost no chance. Okay. The record between 1990 and Kyler Murray in 2018. So Steve Collins in 1990 and Kyler Murray in 2018. The record of the quarterback who had less experience in this game, and by less, I don't mean almost as much. I mean 0 to this guy's done it before. 2-14-1, 2 wins, 14 losses, and 1 tie. And the 2 wins were Sam Bradford and Justin Fuente. What? So that's kind of mind-blowing right there in itself. 2-14-1. Well, as God is my witness, Ryan, I was sitting on the floor. The interview room table was right here on me, was about up to my eyes. I was sitting on the floor about 1.5 feet away from Jalen Hurts at the Kansas game. I posted a video of the interview with Jalen Hurts on our website on the story that says, what's the headline? Can freshman Michael Hawkins keep OU's quarterback streak alive versus Texas? Jalen Hurts, when I asked him, you're from Texas, you're from Houston, what do you know about OU Texas? And he says, not much. He got asked, have you ever been to a game before? He said, no, never been to one of those. And I said, well, it's a pretty huge game in case you didn't notice. And you can listen to the video on the website. You know, what do you think about this game coming up? That's your next game. You just beat the Kansas Jayhawks, and now you got to play the Texas Longhorns. He looked me in the eye and he said, I played in the Iron Bowl. I played in big games before. I think I'll be all right. And I'll be damned if he wasn't right. He was all right. He was very good in that game. He's a guy that bucked the trend and was the next guy to win against a quarterback who had played in the game before. Jalen hadn't. The other guy had. So that worked out for Jalen. Well, guess what? He was right. He had played in the Iron Bowl before. He started for 3 years. He played in the SEC championship, played in the national championship game. So that's why I say he bucked the trend. He didn't fit that mold of the guys who came in and said, this game is huge. You can't understand how big this game is. He understood. He had done it before. Then 2 years later, or no, the next year, 2020, with no crowd, right? With 25% capacity because it was the COVID year. Spencer Rattler wins the game. Spencer Rattler beats his guy who had, again, more experience, Sam Ehlinger. Had more experience in the game. Spencer Rattler won the game, though. And again, there was not 92,000. It was not split right down the middle. It was not insane on both sides of the field at all times. It was a special circumstance. And then you spin it forward to last year, 2023, Dylan Gabriel, he had actually been to the stadium before, right? Because he was out with a concussion the year before. He started for 2.5 years at Central Florida. He had played in big games before, not one this big, but he had plenty of experience. And now you're looking at Dylan Gabriel being the 3rd straight quarterback who's come in and bucked this trend. So it was 2-14-1 was the record. Now it's 5-14-1. 3-game winning streak for the least experienced quarterback. You ask yourself, does it matter in this game anymore? I think it matters. I think what you're looking at now is a true freshman in Michael Hawkins who literally has never been in a game this big before. He's been at Auburn. He's played against Tennessee. He's never been in one of these. Versus a guy who's done it. This will be his 3rd year in a row, as you mentioned. I think that's a big factor. I think the fact that you've got a quarterback trying to calm himself down, breathe, get your heart rate down a little bit, execute the offense. Don't get lost in the moment. Don't look for your mom and dad. Just execute the offense versus a guy who's like, yeah, I'm probably going to be a 1st-round pick. I might take my team to the playoff again this year. I don't know, feeling cute, that kind of thing. It's Quinn Ewers is going to be perfectly fine mentally, emotionally, regulated, all that. And I'm thinking that Michael Hawkins, there's going to be moments. I know we talked in the previous segments about his poise and all that, but I think there's going to be moments where he looks like a freshman. So all that is to say, Oklahoma is behind the curve a little bit when it comes to having the most experienced player at the most important position in this game.
And when you look at Jalen Hurts put the ball on the turf 2 times. He's not the reason Oklahoma won that game.
Yep.
CeeDee Lamb is the
Yep.
reason Oklahoma won that game. Spencer Rattler got benched in that game. Now he came back, but he got benched in that game. And Dylan Gabriel had to lead kind of an out-of-body experience. We've not seen Dylan Gabriel operate a 2-minute drill like that at any point in his career. And I love Dylan Gabriel. I'm rooting for him at Oregon, all that stuff. But it's not straightforward, which is why I think it goes down to a lot of – Brent Venables talked about the poise that Michael Hawkins has and all that stuff, and why he's confident that he's not going to make the moment too big. He also had the throwaway line, though, of – this is paraphrasing – I'm not naive. He's not experienced this. I'm not like running away from that either. So this is where it kind of circles back to where I was at going into the Tennessee game, which is I really feel like Oklahoma needs to win the turnover battle by 2 or more to really help themselves out. But I think you have a lot more faith that Michael Hawkins will do his part in that, which is not coughing the ball up. That was the issue. Oklahoma did what it needed to do to win the turnover battle against Tennessee, but Jackson had an awful interception, a really, really bad lateral fumble, and then the fumble where he got hit on, the 5-yard line. That's stuff that we just haven't seen out of Michael Hawkins yet. We could see it on Saturday, but I think it'd be picky against what we've seen for him to just suddenly have this big nuclear meltdown. Whereas you look at Quinn Ewers under no pressure in 2022, he was good, but we left that game going, it's kind of crazy. If Quinn Ewers had actually played well, it should have been 60, and instead it was 49. Quinn Ewers had 3 turnovers last year in this game. Now, one of them was a great hit by Billy Bowman on Jatavian Sanders. Really hard for me to put that second interception at the feet at Quinn Ewers, but the first one was the Ginger Williams one and the Peyton Bowen fumble. That was dislodging it from Quinn Ewers. He has shown he can put the ball on the turf in this game. And as we kind of mentioned earlier, Oklahoma is as gifted as any defense, as opportunistic as any defense this year. They got the +8 turnover margin. I think they've pulled 8 fumbles themselves, had 5 interceptions as well, or recovered 8 fumbles. So we'll see there. That gets to another phase of the game, Hoove. We talk a ton about turnovers. We talk a ton about special teams. Last year, Oklahoma was a little bit of a tire fire on special teams and won anyway. This is the last time we really saw Josh Plaster after his punt got blocked. You had the big field position nightmare off the lateral, play on a kickoff that worked really well until you found out it was illegal because the ball didn't go backwards. I don't think you have that worry this year on the punt team with Luke Elzinga and what he's done. We've sung his praises. Oklahoma's coverage teams have been really, really good. Now suddenly you're looking, though, at Tyler Keltner back available. We know that Zach Schmidt has a bigger leg than Keltner. Part of what we didn't know was how was Brent Venables going to value the fact that we've seen Zach Schmidt in big spots miss kicks. We haven't seen Keltner. Keltner got that job to start with. But then Zach Schmidt at Auburn, not 1 but 2, not long kicks, but high pressure moments. That's where Zach Schmidt had failed the previous 2 years, and he was money on both kicks. It's going to be really interesting to see how Brent Venables handles, because he has not said Tyler Keltner is back and is our kicker. He's merely just said Tyler Keltner back available. It'll be fascinating to see what Venables does between Keltner and Schmidt and how that thing kind of plays out if Oklahoma's kick a bunch of field goals.
Yeah, I would think that the field goal job is going to go to Keltner. Nice job last week or 2 weeks ago at Auburn, right? You did a good thing, Zach Schmidt. But I just think in general, Ryan, and I hate to keep piling on this kid, but I just think he's kind of, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. I think he's shown the Oklahoma coaching staff that he does struggle at times with high pressure kicks. And so, assuming that, you don't need an appendix to complete your follow through or something like that with your leg, right? You're a soccer player. Do you need your appendix much? I wouldn't think so to finish that kick, but no, I'm having fun, of course, but sounds like he's back. Sounds like Keltner is the man by all accounts. So, good thing is if you do got to go to Schmidt, hey, he's shown you that now he can make some. Maybe he's matured a little bit. Maybe he's had some coaching, some counseling, whatever it is, to, sports psychology. OU was one of the very first schools in the country, football-wise especially, to embrace sports psychology. And they, had a specific hired, Nikki Moore was her name, hired her specifically to counsel, or at least bring in with her staff, counsel the athletes. Hey, if you're struggling mentally, if you're struggling emotionally, come talk to us. So that might be something that has popped up in Zach Schmidt's, situation. Maybe he's a high leverage kicker now. You never know. But you're right. the punt last year in the end zone where Plaster looked like he was at the 35-yard line, he was just kind of taking his time, and he had 11 guys, 10 guys in his face. You can't make that mistake. You've got to look up and you've got to see, okay, it looks like they're coming, and you got to get that thing off in one step, not two. And then you obviously, stating the obvious here, you can't have a fumbled punt, which going back this season, Oklahoma has had 3, I think, or is it 4? Or at least they've had 3 that hit the ground and then have like come up and fallen backwards and had to make acrobatic catches on a couple others. Just catch the football. Don't do anything, horrible that's going to put 7 points on the board for the other team. And then, kicking wise, we talked about OU. We haven't talked about Texas. Burt Auburn is a guy that is still there. He's still kicking for the Longhorns. He's only 2 of 3 this year, which is interesting because they haven't needed any field goals. They haven't needed him to come out and kick any field goals because they've been stomping people into the ground. So it makes you wonder. He's a guy that has kicked important field goals in this series before, but he's only 2 of 3 this year. Does that mean maybe he might come in and have a little more pressure on him? I don't know. There's a lot of ways to break down special teams. As I said, don't get anything blocked in the end zone. Be aware. Don't fumble any, kickoffs or punt returns. And I think Oklahoma can play this one pretty even. I think they can come out even. They don't have to have, the skies part for something magical to happen on special teams. It would help if Peyton Bowen added to the scoreboard, right, with a 60 or 70-yard punt return. It would help if, Tyler Keltner hits a walk-off 56-yarder in the first half or something like that. But I don't think Oklahoma's going to need any of that stuff this time.
Yeah, and another big X factor, too, part of Burt Auburn not being really used, part of Texas not playing a close game. On one hand, it's very similar to the Tennessee conversation. You would much rather be the team that's been so dominant, whether you're playing the 85 Bears or you're playing Temple. You want to be so dominant that you're not in close games. Oklahoma has not been that. But they have been in close games. It was tight against Houston, figured that thing out. Tight against Tulane, pulled that thing away. Tight against Auburn there at the end. The thing that OU couldn't do was ever get close enough to Tennessee once Jack Snarnold started, kind of his little mini implosion turnover-wise, to make that matter for Nico. You saw last week for Tennessee, Nico, it wasn't like a massive turnover, but the really bad decision on the last play of the game didn't even give his team a chance, ran out of bounds. You're not going to get that with Quinn Ewers. He's been there. He's done that. He's played in a bunch of games. It's an experienced Texas team, but every year, every team is different. Coaches tell us that all the time. Texas has not really been pushed at all, and I don't think that I'm confident that Texas, not that it means that they'll win, but they're not going to just totally lose their minds in a close game. But until you're in that moment, like a Ryan Wingo, a really talented true freshman wide receiver we've talked about, how do you know that he doesn't have a Xavier Worthy moment and fumble the ball or something like that? Because they haven't been in those close games.
I like what Matt said earlier, and that is, I think, and I'm with him here on this. I agree. I think Texas has the better team. Texas has the better roster right now. I also think Texas has played a softer schedule and has not been tested, whereas Oklahoma has played a slightly tougher schedule. Where would you put Tennessee versus Michigan? One was at home, the other was on the road. One was defending national champ. The other one was thinking they were going to make a run this year, and they still might. But clearly, Michigan is hindered in a lot of ways where Tennessee is not. But I guess the point being, they haven't played. It's like I said, they ain't played nobody, Paul. So the fact Oklahoma hasn't really played anybody except going on the road and beating Auburn, except getting a couple of fourth quarter touchdowns against Tennessee. OU has been tested. OU has been pushed. Texas has absolutely not.
Yeah. Then just real quick, couple things that you can't know. We'll all find out together. Brent Venables and this staff, short or not a lot of history to know, but 2 years ago, the 2022 season, you saw a ton of fake field goals rolled out there. Last year against BYU, the fake punt that was called back. I don't know why it was called back, but it was technically called back. Poor Nick Anderson. You've seen stuff like that. They tried the gadget play on the kickoff against Texas. Hell, even last year, flipping around, Texas had the big fake punt, right? That on the goal line stand drive, I think, that I think that was that drive. Anyway, it got that thing going.
Wasn't there one at Texas Tech too?
Yes, there was a fake in Lubbock as well.
Lubbock, yeah, that's what I mean. At Texas Tech,
Yeah.
Braden Willis.
Or no, it was Iowa State. Sorry, it was Iowa State. That was when we talked to Zach Schmidt after the game, because I remember the two things that came out of that post game were talking with Zach Schmidt and talking with Jeff Levy about the offensive line change, like back to back, and being like, "What a weird post game experience we had here."
I thought they had one at Tech too, the one that they lost in the season finale, where they went for it on fourth down. I was trying to remember if it was a sneak, but it was a pass to the tight end. I thought Braden Willis got in the end zone.
What I remember,
and it was called back.
What I remember from Texas Tech is,
he dropped it. He dropped it.
Running a reverse on the first play of overtime or trying to get Dylan Gabriel out there. That's all I remember from Lubbock was that.
Hey, Coach Venables. Hey, it's Coach Levy. Hey, I got a really good play for you. You ready for this?
Yeah.
That was a bad play.
So I think it may have been, but anyway, we the point stands, right? We have not seen any of that really from Oklahoma this year. Doug Deacon, I think, is a lot better than Jay Nunez at what he does when it comes to special team stuff. I think the proof's kind of been in the pudding with their return team, stuff like that. So we'll see there. And then the other thing is, it feels like, especially recently, random OU Texas heroes pop up. I just sifted through the last 5 or 6 years of this rivalry, okay? Not going deep cuts, anything like that. 2021, your backup quarterback wins you the football game in Caleb Williams. Now, I know big 5-star top recruit, but he's the backup quarterback. And then Spencer Rattler has to come in and run your 2-point conversion play because he's the one that had repped it. In 2020, I know that looking back on it, saying that Drake Stoops is an unlikely hero sounds crazy with what Drake Stoops went on to become. But in 2020, he was still a really good story, a really tough kid, a smart kid, but he hadn't ascended to a guy that's going to lead the Big 12 in receptions. And he has a big play there. 2017, do you remember Jeff Badet absolutely torching Texas's defense? They discovered this guy, Rodney Anderson. Ever heard of him? That's when he really came alive. I think it was 48 yards, and then he just took off like wildfire after that. That's just like the last 6, 7, 8 years. We're going to walk out of this thing, and more times than not, there's somebody on one side, and that's just the OU wins, that you look at and go, yeah, you didn't really have that guy having a career day, but suddenly he'll go down in OU Texas lore for either the Crimson or the Burnt Orange.
Yeah, it's fun. The way this series produces heroes. I've been doing this. This will be my 21st year in a row I've covered this OU Texas game. And I'm grateful and thankful for each one of them. They've all been a spectacle one way or another, and they've all left an incredible impression upon me as a writer in my career. It's just been something I never thought that would happen. And I walk out of that damn stadium every year, Ryan. I'm covered with sweat, and I'm mad about the Wi-Fi, or I'm mad about the view that we had in the fourth quarter, or whatever it is, wherever they stick us, or I'm mad that the opposing team. The losing team didn't come in first. The winning team came in first this year and threw me off. And maybe I'm mad that there's bad lighting or there's bad sound or something on the interviews. And I'm just like, I go back to my seat in the press box and I just think, what the hell did I just see? It was incredible. Every year, what you're saying, somebody somewhere that you don't expect has some kind of performance and becomes some kind of hero, and we don't maybe appreciate it in the moment. I don't know. We don't appreciate the totality of it in the moment, but I don't know. It's I'll say it one more time for those in the back to be on the record. This is the best rivalry in college football. There have been 44 of these things. Did I see that right this week? Somebody came up with a stat. I think it was it Toby Rowland? I can't remember. 44 of these matchups have been between teams that are ranked. 44, which is that number is more than the Iron Bowl. It's more than the Egg Bowl. It's more than any other SEC rivalry combined. So OU Texas, best quality football, best when you're talking about state fair and the food and the rides and all the drunk people, best atmosphere, best setup where everybody on this side is burnt orange and everybody on this side is crimson. It's the best. It is the best. So I'm thankful for 21. Here's to 21 more.
Game 120 in this series. Texas leads it 63, 51, and 5.
Do the math.
You look at
I've covered what are you saying, 1/6 of these games? Holy crap.
Yeah, you're old, boss.
Am I that old?
Yeah, that's what it means. It means you're old. Here's the thing. I guess we're not supposed to say this, whatever. Purely correct. I mean, I've been in that stadium every year since 2004 on one end or the other or in a press box. So one of those things where, yes, I get it. I'm not, 500 years old like who? I'm kidding. But it's one of those things where there's a lot of history that goes down. It's the 88th consecutive year, Hoove, that this game's been played inside the Cotton Bowl. Obviously, this does not count the game that was at the Big 12 championship game, whatever. But the games in the Cotton Bowl, 42, 41, and 4. Texas holds that edge, 42, 41, 4. There are not many rivalries in sports. Great rivalries that are that razor's edge right there. Texas dominated the early stages, and since then, it's been pretty even, except for when Bob Stoops came along. That's where you get the 7 of 10, 11 of 16, all that stuff for Oklahoma. So
yeah, they've dominated the last 10 years, the last 20 years, the last 30 years, the last 40 years, and the last 50 years. Oklahoma has a winning record in all those decades.
Yeah, so it's big time. They don't often get to be just straight up the underdog like they will. There is one more X factor in this game that we do have to discuss, and it's not on the rundown. Today, Wednesday, we record this on Wednesday. It publishes on Thursday. We talked to Brent Venables on the SEC teleconference, and I think you might know where we're going with this, Hoop. Maybe not.
No,
There's a very important question that was asked of Brent Venables about the great Fletcher's Corny Dog, one of the great staples of the State Fair, Texas. Venables on his coach's show, he was reminiscing with Teddy Lehman on Monday night about, hey, do they actually get to enjoy the fair? And Brent talked about, yeah, if you win, we give you 90 minutes in Fair Park. Teddy remembers drinking what I believe was labeled officially as a nice cold iced tea served in a wax cup.
Yep.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, stuff like that. In all of Brent Venables' coaching career, he arrived in 1999. He was the DC at Oklahoma for a very long time. This is now his third OU Texas as a head coach. Not had a Fletcher's Corny Dog. Now, I don't know what Steve Sarkisian's take on it is, but if Sark has had some Fletchers, Oklahoma fans, I'm sorry. I'm not going to pick Oklahoma and Brent Venables to win this game until we find out that he has come into contact with the Fletcher's Corny Dogs on Fair Park.
Yeah, he said if he had one of those fried corn dogs, he thinks his body would stop. If you look at the two coaches, not making fun here, I'm just making an observation. One looks like he's never had a corn dog, and one looks like he's had corn dogs all regularly throughout his life. Like me, I've had corn dogs throughout my life. And that's why I look like this. Now, Brent, you saw the video that Holly Rowe posted before the Tennessee game where it's 107 in the stadium and he's out there running stadium steps the day of the game or the day before the game, the Friday before the game. That's Brent Venables. Fitness, fitness, fitness. Brent, from me to you, trust me, you need to have a corny dog from Fletcher's at the Texas State Fair before it's all over. Take advantage. Go stand in line. They'll bring you to the front of the line. They won't even make you wait. Matter of fact, they'll probably comp your coupons. Okay, it's like 10 coupons for a corny dog. They'll comp your coupons because you're Brent freaking Venables. Go have a corny dog. You will not regret it, and your body will not stop working.
I'm not going to go as far to say it'll change Brent Venables' life because he's been in a lot of cool moments, a lot of big-time college football games, coaching a bunch of national championship games, all that stuff. But it might be close. It might be close. We need to get the Soul Mission on that. That needs to be their whole job on Saturday is to acquire a Fletcher's Corny Dog for Brent Venables.
It's not the same, though. You can't have – he said just what they bring us on the bus is all I've ever eaten at the State Fair. Just whatever they bring us on the bus after the game. That's not the same. You can't have that thing catered. There's a Fletcher's at Gaylord Family, Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. He has access to those. But the ones at the Texas State Fair hit harder. You got to go stand in line, and you got to get weight, and you got to smell all the smells and hear all the sounds. And by the time you get up there and you get your corny dog, man, you're so hungry and just like, it's the best. It's the best.
Got to suffer a little bit to get it. Maybe Oklahoma wins. That needs to be the Soul Mission.
Yeah.
Oklahoma Sooners.
Or he could join us before kickoff. We're there 2-3 hours before kickoff. He could join us in line. We'll let him cut in front of us.
He's more than welcome to join us. I think that Norman, Oklahoma might implode if they find out that the head coach is taking time out to go get corn dogs with some media members as
Man's
opposed
gotta
to
eat.
repping the team, but that's neither here nor there. That coverage, so much more. It's OU Texas week, so you know we're blowing this bad boy out. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com is the place to be. All of our coverage, all the videos and all that stuff, but a bunch of stories coming out. Go read all those. Then John Hoover Media on YouTube. That's the YouTube channel. Like we said, subscribe, hit the little bell. That way you'll know, it'll notify you when we put stuff out there. If you enjoy the podcast, follow us, leaving a rating and review. That helps us get a bigger audience, more people that listen, the cooler stuff we can do with it, all that stuff. And be sure you're following us on all different places. X at Sooners on SI. That's the big catch-all. Hooves at Johnny Hoover. I'm _ Ryan Chapman. We got Bryce at McKinnis Bryce. He'll be out there with us in Dallas, so we'll be a three-man squad, boots on the ground. Dakota Gregory does a great job at Dakota Gregory, and Randall Sweet still helping us out. Randall Sweet 5. Other than that, so just some other stuff. Battle Series softball is going to be continuing on. We're actually going to talk to Patty and a couple players Wednesday night. Quite frankly, who doesn't know this yet? It's OU Texas week. I'm probably going to put the video up, hold some of the stories from that until the next week, till South Carolina week. But we will start to have a steady flow of some softball coverage, get to know some of the newbies, all that stuff. Basketball's around the corner, all that stuff. But we're full speed ahead on the Sooners and the Horns. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. For John Hoover, I'm Ryan Chapman. Next time you'll hear from us, we'll be somewhere inside the Cotton Bowl, certified fresh post-game pod, back on the Sooners on SI podcast. But until then, we'll see you guys. Have a safe trip down to Dallas. If you see us, say what's up. And until then, we'll talk to you guys.